So with that, I'll say I'm so excited about today's conversation. Most of us, I think, who've made it to the session know that we have a moral imperative to teach kids to read. We know that we could do better teaching kids to read, that we need to do better teaching kids to read. I think most of us here know that we are better as a collective society when all our children and our families are supported through their education and in their lives. But what I'm really excited about today's conversation, although I love talking about literacy all the time, is that we're not just talking about literacy today. But we're talking about parent power. We're talking about the kind of leadership and courage we need to transform systems and what happens differently when we really center our families and those who are closest to experiencing school and navigating schools for their children. What happens when we really put them front and center? And we have the incredible Lakisha Young from the Oakland REACH, who I can't think of a better person really to be having this conversation with. Lakisha has been at the forefront of this work in Oakland and nationally for quite some time now. She has her full bio on their website, so I'll just share a few things. I think many of you know Lakisha's work. You know her work if you are here in Oakland, certainly, but again, increasingly has really been not just talking about why we have to teach our kids to read, but really centering what happens when our families are the ones who are making those changes. I first met Lakisha several years ago now when she was really at the forefront in Oakland of the Literacy for All campaign. And we did our organizations did a series of summer reading workshops. And I remember just being struck by how deeply her team was, we've done a lot of folks do parent engagement often, but how deeply her staff of parents and families were so connected to the folks that they were serving. So bringing their families out and the students and their kids out to do these reading workshops, the way that they were just in constant communication, right? Like do you need a ride to get to this event in the next 30 minutes? And the way that they seemed to really know and understand something about every single parent who came through that room. And over the years, which I won't get into all the work she's done because she's going to share that, but the ways that they've created educational programs now through the pandemic, ongoing from the pandemic. The reason that has felt, from my opinion, so transformational is not just because it's led by parents, but it's because every single part of it has been about what their families have said they need, and then them responding to making that happen. Lakisha is the founder and CEO of the Oakland REACH, which is a parent-run organization. It was founded in 2016 to make the powerless parent powerful. Through their work, they have done thousands of one-on-one interviews. They have created new programs, and they have created a team of informed and organized parent advocates fighting for quality schools. Lakisha is now a national voice on parent advocacy. She is a senior fellow at the Center on Reinventing Public Education, is a regular contributor to their People in Action series. And in 2022, she was appointed to U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona's Parents and Families Engagement Council. And again, I think every day I see a new piece about the great work that the Oakland REACH is doing. And I will say one more time that I think what I have really been inspired by is seeing how Lakisha herself is unapologetically about making sure families have what they need, to what they think they need and what they want to see in order to be supported and successful. And to lead this conversation with Lakisha, I thought who better than Karen D'Souza, who is a senior writer at EdSource. Karen, I have seen over the past year, has really started taking on a lot of reporting around literacy. Many of you have read her recent pieces, A Movement Rises to Change the Teaching of Reading, The Right to Read, It Took a Lawsuit Against California are two of the recent pieces. Highly recommend those. I heard her on a podcast recently through EdSource, which made me, really think, wow, it would be really incredible to have her voice be the one helping really drive this conversation, because she's really been digging so deep into this issue. She's an award-winning journalist who's covered lifestyle, parenting, health, housing, travel, and the arts for the San Jose Mercury News. She is a 4-time Pulitzer juror, and her writing has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Miami Herald, San Francisco Chronicle, and Seattle Times. With that, again, I'll just give a quick reminder that please do use the Q&A, ask your questions. We're going to pause throughout, and we hope you engage and tune into this wonderful conversation about how we really transform outcomes, not just for families, but for our communities when we center the voices of our parents and families. And with that, I will hand it over to Karen to get us started. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to be here this morning. Good morning to everybody. And especially because I feel like there's a lot of darkness in the world right now, and maybe particularly in education news. So I personally find it really thrilling to help spotlight you, Lakisha, and Oakland REACH. It really feels like a bright spark in a pretty dark time. And what you've accomplished in the last, is it 6 years? It's really nothing short of heroic. And so to dig a little deeper into what you've done, now, when did you first discover the literacy crisis? Is it something you discovered, or have you always been aware of it? I know most of us here probably do know less than half of California children can read at grade level, and that's before the pandemic, before the school closures. So every possibility, it's quite a bit worse now. My question is, why aren't there more alarm bells going off? Why has the literacy crisis gone undercover for so long?
Well, I think your first part of the question was asking me sort of, was this something that I started or that REACH started? Before I get started, I do just want to thank everyone for being here today, because it's a Friday and I don't see myself as that special, but I definitely think we're doing special work. And I definitely want to thank the REACH team that's here today as well. This alarm bell ringing actually came from our families. So on October 5th, 2019, which was actually the last day of the teacher strike, it was also the day that our opportunity ticket was unanimously approved by our school board, right? And I'll let folks do their own homework on the opportunity ticket, but the opportunity ticket policy was essentially saying that if schools consolidate or close, that parents and families, families from those schools would have a priority preference into a higher performing school, right? And we had been working a long time on that campaign. We had worked with families from the Hills around that campaign. And so that was October 5th. And, won't stop, never stop. So pretty much a couple of weeks after that, we went to our families and we asked them, what's keeping you up at night when it comes to your child's education? And we did this as an open slate to just see what our families would come back with. And about 75 or 80% of our families said something about literacy. They were saying stuff like, I don't think my child is reading on grade level. Right? I don't know what grade level my child is reading on, even though I don't think that they're reading on grade level. And they also expressed concern that they were not getting support at the school level to sort of understand how to do something different at home. So we literally as a team kind of looked at each other and was like, okay, like literacy, right? It was a real thing. It was just that organic. I mean, Sanam can tell you, from all of our meetings, it was sort of like, and we had just come off off the opportunity ticket campaign, which was a lot of work. So a little bit, it was kind of like, okay, our parents are feeling so powerless around this reading thing. Do we want to do another campaign around this right now? Or what can we do so that we can both better understand this crisis at a bigger level? We didn't know. We did not know. We're not shocked, because the reason why we are out here doing this work is because our kids don't have access to a quality education. So of course, literacy would be a part of that. But we had not identified literacy specifically. Our families did. So in our minds, we were like, what can we do now, right? What are the steps we can take to start putting more power in the hands of families to have information, resources, and tools to do something about it? And that's when we actually teamed up with OLC. Sanam can tell you about our many, many conversations and planning sessions. I think I just called Sanam and was like, I'm gonna need you guys to help us. Like, we need to put this together for our families. Here are the problems that our families are experiencing. And this is how our solutions need to address those problems. So Karen, our first big initiative that Sanam was speaking to earlier was the Keeping It 100 literacy series. That was in the summer of 2019. It was in the summer of 2019. And if people are wondering, like, where did the word keeping it 100 come from? I think it was a dual meaning. We wanted at least 100 families to participate and be a part of it. But keeping it 100 is also a slang term for we need to keep it real. Like we have a crisis in the city. Our families know about it. Our families are ready to do something about it, right? But they are feeling powerless. And so that was a summer series, and we kind of took on a triage effect. So that triage effect was that a parent would come in with their child. So one of the main things our parents said was, I don't know what level my child is on. Okay, well, we need to solve for that. And that's what
there wouldn't even be that kind of communication.
What'd you say?
It's interesting that there wouldn't even be that kind of really basic communication between the schools and the parents.
This is what our parents said. We don't know the grade level. So we worked with Sonam and said, Sonam, we need to figure out an assessment. How do we assess? And we spend a lot of time on that. And Sonam OLC group came back with something really great, which was something called the San Diego Quick, which assesses word fluency, right? It's about like a 10 or 15 minute assessment. So a parent would come in, they would sit with their child, right? OLC recruited some Oakland teachers to come and actually run these assessments with families, okay? And we were sort of on rotation. I mean, Sonam can tell you, we had slots for 100 families. We ended up having like 125 and we had to stop. I mean, we could not slot any more families in at that time, but that was how big the demand was. So they would have that assessment. After that, parents would come out. They looked a little sullen, like they were not happy, right? It was like, it was almost having your worst fears confirmed, but knowledge is power, right? So when they came out, they were also able, so two other things happened in this sort of triage approach, which was the child was actually able to get a book on their level. So a parent was able to say, this is the level my child is at, and this is what it would look for them to have, like both a book at their level, but kind of a stretch book, right? And so that's, again, that's more knowledge. But the third and even critical session was the advocacy session. So that's where we really did the tools around, this is how you take this data and start to become a more critical partner with your friend around, with your school around your child's literacy. And it was stuff like schools do interim assessments pretty like around October. You like when August starts, you should be scheduling a conversation with your teacher. Let your teacher know you participated in these workshops. Share the data with your teacher. Let them know that you are at the table, right? Let them know that you care about your child's literacy, that you now have data to tell you where your child is at, and that you want to be looped in and connected to everything that's happening at the school classroom level around your child's literacy. Now, again, everything we do comes from listening to our parents and building solutions. So we surveyed our parents at the end of that. The survey results and the satisfaction rate was through the roof. Our parents were like, this is the best thing you guys can be doing. What is next? What are we going to do? We're ready. Because again, that's power, right? It's power to have information, even when that information is not the information you want. But now that not only do you have the information, you have a pathway to do something about it, right? And so that journey sort of led us to be like, whoa, our parents want to do something bigger around this. And in our mind, that's policy change. So one of the things I know Sonam didn't mention, but knows obviously, is that we are about also pushing policies that create systemic change, right? There may be people who will never know who Oakland REACH is, but we hope that they will sit in classrooms, right? And benefit from the work and things that we have pushed forward. So once again, I'm telling you, we're still not literate at this point in time. We're not literacy experts. We're parent experts. And we know how to bring parents to the table, and we know how to facilitate experiences to build both the knowledge and power of parents. So what we did first was we like to work in coalition. We often don't always work in coalition, and that's a conversation that may come up at later, but we actually thrive off partnering with people when it makes sense. So we were eager to kind of understand, what is everybody else doing around literacy? We can't be the only people in the city who care about literacy. What's happening in the ecosystem? And so as we started doing that work, we started to learn that there was a lot of folks working on literacy, right?
Absolutely.
And there was a key distinction that we saw. There was a lot of focus on early literacy, right? There was a lot of focus on early literacy because I think Emily Hanford had just came out with a lot of sort of research based. A lot of funders were sort of pushing in that direction. And, you know, because we're the kind of organization where we pick our work and then we push for funding after that. Like that's how we do.
Right.
We sort of push back on that. And what we said is, what are we supposed to tell the high school and middle school parents? What are we actually supposed to tell our families? Our mamas can't read, right? So the early childhood is really like the early reading is really important, right? But we have to actually move the whole family around literacy if we ever want to see systemic change, right? And it was through that journey that we got connected with NAACP and Capri Weaver, right? And other folks. And through that, you know, those conversations, that's where the Literacy for All campaign was born. And with what made the Literacy for All campaign so unique and powerful, in my opinion, was a few things. One is it was literally led by parents and families with kids in Oakland schools, Black and brown. Okay. I don't care what people have to say about REACH. You can check our registration forms. We are at Oakland parents. Okay. Okay. All day, every day. Okay. And I'm an OUSD parent. And it was led by parents. It also took a holistic approach, which says that we need to actually look at systemically uplifting the whole family around literacy. So not only should we be taking care of the babies, we also need to make sure that like the middle school and high school kids who have gotten lost in this system, right, are able to be supported. And for the first time in a long time, and this is what happens when you have connection to community, we had parents raising their hands and saying, I'm functioning illiterate, right? Like I never really learned how to read well. Yes, I've worked. Yes, I've taken care of my family, but this is a shame that I carry, right? And you're not going to get that out of people unless they believe in you, trust you, are connected to you, and feel like you're actually moving the work in the right way. But that is exactly the kind of stuff that you want to hear people telling you, because you can't solve problems that people don't tell you is a problem,
and
right?
You can't build those relationships overnight. You have to really.
No, you can't. You know how you build those relationships? And I say this to everybody on here, you got to show up and show up and show up. And when you say it's 8 o'clock, you need to be there at 7:55. When you say you're going to do this, you got to keep your word. When you tell parents that you are going to do something, you have to do it and you have to deliver, because our communities, rightfully so, have a significant amount of distrust around systems. And so it's really important for us as Oakland REACH to not just show up, but show up better than just to show up. And that's how you build those relationships. And that's how folks will say, hey, this is something that we're really working on. And
how did you mobilize a team to do that? Because that's so much like energy and passion and commitment, the kind of things Sanam was talking about, texting people, figuring out Ubers. How did you?
REACH was already a team at the time of this. So if you want me to respond to like how did the REACH form, that's a separate question. But our team was already intact, and we have a very strong, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen Drumline, but we are one drum, one note, right? So everybody coming to the table, and that includes me, we all come with trauma. We all come with things that tell us to do things in a certain kind of way, but we do a lot of work with our team to make sure that we can be the servants. I say to my team a lot that we are here to serve, right? And I will sometimes say sarcastically, can you serve or do you need to be served? Okay, because there's a difference between the two.
Yeah.
Servant's work means that you have to care for yourself at the level that you are able to then show up for people in the ways that they need you to show up. So we already had a team that we were doing deep leadership development with or whatever that was ready to respond. So when Sanam says that our team, which she saw externally, that's a lot of work. I always tell people, what you see outside from REACH, you can't even imagine the work we're doing on the inside. And I'm talking about inside of the org and inside of ourselves to make that happen.
That's the hard part, right?
That is the hardest part. I mean, sometimes that stuff is so hard. By the time you get to the front door, you like on your knees. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's a pandemic. Let me circle back really quick, because I do feel like a lot of people talk about parent engagement and, you know, welcoming.
I don't like that word, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, right. But I mean, the thing that struck me about you guys is like really letting parents lead. Why is it so important to let the parents lead?
I mean, I shouldn't have to answer that question. Because if we were living in the hills, nobody would ask us, why is it important to let parents lead, right? I mean, parents have the highest moral authority. And I'm not just saying parents who give birth to kids. I'm talking about caregivers. I mean, we have, I mean, some people don't even realize, but oftentimes, even in our Black communities, we got a lot more grandmamas raising their grandchildren. One of our most powerful, you guys hold just one quick second. This is so tacky. Hold on. The battery on my computer. Hold on. Give me 5 seconds.
No worries. It's the magic of Zoom.
Oh my God. I mean, this has already been a mysterious Friday. Why not just have my message come up says that my battery is low? So when we talk about parents, there's a broad term around that. And I think it's important to talk about this on the earlier part of this conversation so that the audience is also understanding that when we say parents and caregivers in our communities, Black and Brown, that can be a number of folks. It can be grandmamas, it can be the dads, it can be aunties and things of that nature, right? Can you go back? Because that's actually when I was plugging this in, I kind of lost a little bit of track of the question you were asking. Oh,
Sure.
You said,
Letting
why should
parents lead? And I think you're correct that there are more privileged parents who feel a sense of agency. But I do think, honestly, I think in America, it's pretty widespread to feel almost like the teacher is sort of doing you a favor. When you're trying to get information about something, like they're so busy and they're overworked and they're overwhelmed. I often feel this way. Like, well, I don't want to bother them with my question about my kid. But then when you think about it, really, it's like, well, that is the center of the activity, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's and we'll probably get more into the collective bargaining agreement stuff a little bit later in the conversation, but we don't want to conflate issues, right? So teachers being supported and having the ability to support family and kids well is really critical. And parents having the right to want their kids to be educated when they oftentimes are trying to disrupt like intergenerational poverty is also very true. And those things need to come together in benefit of the child. So in Oakland, there's so much political divisiveness that we ultimately forget that like, these are about the kids. If every single parent pulled their kid out of schools, we wouldn't have nothing to talk about. Like this is ultimately supposed to be about educating children. And I do believe that most people feel that way. But I think we really start to get really territorial around certain pieces, recognizing that like both are true. Both are true.
Right.
Teachers carry a lot. Teachers have a lot that they're figuring out, right? And parents are working like the amount of commitment that both our team and our families make outside of working, outside of taking care of family members, to show up and be present in very like deep ways to change the academic outcomes for their kids, that has to be recognized. They are not in a position to like take dollars and go to a private school, right? So what they're doing is just literal sweat equity, being at the table to do anything they can to learn and move things forward. And that's why me personally, that's why our team, we take that very seriously. I'm just saying this right now on this call. I feel a deep personal responsibility for doing this work the right way, because I know the level of sacrifice that folks are making to show up when there's distrust. We have folks who we have a lot of our families who are not great readers, do not have great reading comprehension, and they still show up. And I think the third component, which I know will come up as well, is I am a product of an excellent education, that was not supposed to be, because I grew up in the projects of San Francisco. But every time I went grade after grade into the best schools, I start to see that door open and say, wow, it doesn't matter where I started. Education is allowing me to change my family tree. It doesn't matter where I started. It doesn't matter that my family started in Mississippi with my grandmother being 16 in the 9th grade, pregnant with my mother, right? And then having all of her kids by 22 and having to drop out of school. My grandfather only had a 3rd grade education, and I have a master's degree. But the reason why I do the work the way I do the work is because having a dream is nice. Talking about it is nice. You got to do something about it. My mom did things about it. She moved me from schools if it didn't work. right? She was the school choice mom when school choice wasn't even popular. I'm about to be 47 years old. So, but
Wow.
my experience was so like convoluted and happenstance. There's no way that you can scale the outcomes of the way that I got educated. So the reason why we do this work the way we do is so that it's more accessible, so that quality, so that success around education is more accessible to kids just by parents dropping them off every morning, right?
Right. As
Just
it
by
should be.
parents. Like, why can't they do that? And
As it
that's
should.
actually a privilege to be able to drop your kid off and say, I know when I pick you up, you're going to be progressing in reading and math.
Absolutely. Your mother, though, just hearing that story, she must have worked so hard. It really is.
She just knew she wanted me to go to college. She was just kind of like, my mom now lives with me. And I have these conversations with her often where I'm just like, I don't know what you had in your mind, but thank you. Right? Like, I don't know what you had. And she'll say stuff like, oh, I saw these things in you, like why you would be ready for this. But so many parents see things in their children that they know if they were able to get access to
Right.
these sort of schools. But her ability to do that in a time where folks were not doing this, like, I am forever indebted to my mom for what she did because it changed my life. But as a result, I've been able to help change the lives of my family because of that education. It is the ultimate equalizer.
Right.
It is the ultimate equalizer.
And not just your family, right? And
Yeah.
not even just Oakland.
Yeah. Yeah.
You definitely paid her back, her investment
Yeah.
in you. Yeah. So we sort of established why education is your North Star, sort of personally and politically, right? Now, tell us a little bit more about the pandemic. How was that a turning point for the organization?
Yeah.
Small question, just the pandemic.
No, but it's like, it was a complete turning point. So, like I said, one of the things, and Sanam, you may remember this because I think you were there that night, February 12th, 2020. Okay. So a couple of days before Valentine's Day, we were in the throes of the Literacy for All campaign. We had made some huge strides. We had already had a 30 org coalition coming to the table.
Wow.
Powerful. So
Yeah.
the co-leads of the Literacy for All campaign was REACH and the NAACP. Okay. And by the time February hit, Sonam, you may be able to attest to this. This had gotten such a groundswell with families. We'd had hundreds of families and like we had to ask OUSD to let us use auditoriums for school. I mean, it was packed in there. And we were actually moving into bringing the adult literacy department, the adult ed department, because we wanted to start launching literacy classes in the evening for families. What we had learned is that the adult literacy was more focused on ESL, which is awesome, right? But there were not literacy classes for English speaking families, i.e. probably more Black families. But you understand why there wouldn't be, but you understand why that would be, right?
I guess I don't. I probably should.
Because our families are not going to raise their hand and say, I can't read.
Of course.
See, there's a level of trust that then allows you to then be able to put a solution in place, right? So it wasn't like the adult ed department wasn't trying to respond to the community, but they didn't know that they had a community to respond to, right? And what we brought to them was, no. And we had parents who were really interested in signing up for this because it became normal. We normalized making reading a family affair, right? And so that's kind of where we were. And then on February 12th, and so behind the scenes, so we're doing the coalition, we had a huge kind of like, I don't know what you would call it, Sodom, right? We had a huge convening at the OLC offices. We had there was about 50, 60 folks in the room. We had the charter folks, the district folks, the reading orgs, the city of Oakland, right? And we had our families there. And what we were looking to do with the Literacy for All campaign is really come together, right, on behalf of kids. And what we mean by that is like, that sounds like a nice slogan. It really does. Okay. So I just want to tell you, like, I don't want to throw up in my mouth when I say that a little bit, because the point is that there are clear actions that must be taken for that to be true. Right. And so a lot about bringing folks to the table was being able to watch at the time, like Chief Academic Officer Sandra Aguilera talking to Larissa God, what is her last name? She's now the CEO of Education for Change. Okay. Education for Change was doing some pretty innovative stuff around K-2 literacy that they were getting results around, right? And so seeing them talking and saying, hey, let's connect. These are all our Oakland babies. We get caught up in this district charter BS, but these are all Oakland families, right? And we need to bring the collective brilliance together to move the city forward. So having people say like, oh, we're going to touch base. That's how you move the work, and that's how you move the work faster. Somebody's already figured out what you're trying to do. So why would you reinvent the wheel, right? There was pilot work that Wes Jocks and their team were leading. The central office of OUSD have some amazing, I'll tell you that in a second, about how many amazing literacy professionals are in our district, okay? And how we were able to benefit from that as part of the hub. So when you ask like, well, what happened with the pandemic? So on February 12th, we actually, again, got the district to unanimously approve an MOU to move to the science of reading. It was sort of a way to declare that there is a right way to teach our kids how to read, and we are making a commitment to make that happen. We were already doing that work behind the scenes with the district, but it was sort of like a district-wide declaration that we're going to focus on research-based strategies, right? We had like 150 parents and folks there, right? There was also some other interesting political things happening alongside that, which is kind of an interesting part of the conversation. But like, it was a powerful night, right, for families in Oakland. So when you, and then a month later, March 13th, Friday, March 13th, boom, shut down. And I will never, ever forget that day, because what did we do? We got on the phone with our families ASAP and said, there won't be school on Monday. And there probably won't be school for the rest of the month because there's some pandemic going on, or there's some health thing going on, right? What you guys don't understand, we have a lot of families where OUSD do not have their phone numbers. When our parents change their phone numbers, they are not calling the school and saying like, here's my new cell number, okay? So oftentimes we can get to families quicker than, so the robocall stuff is not always helpful, okay?
Right.
And so we text and we call. And so what we said was like, look, we think that we're out for the rest of the month. You guys check the news, huddle up with your folks. We're going to check back in with you on Monday. That was the 16th. On the 16th, we had already had a survey together, ready to start understanding from our families just over a weekend. How are they being impacted by COVID? Because see, our families are the essential workers.
Right.
Our families are the frontline workers. So yeah, so weekend could change their whole situation, right? So what we heard between the 16th and the 18th was people were losing, like, especially the folks who were restaurant workers, bam, done, right? We had folks who were working at clubs, different things like that, bam, done, right? So by the 18th, we were like, people need money. People need money. So we had never, we run a fellowship. We've had over 500 parents participate in our leadership development fellowship called the Oakland Family Advocacy Fellowship, but we had never given out relief funds. We had never given out that. So we didn't know what to do. So we had to quickly make sure that we were doing everything by like federal accounting laws or whatever, but we literally pulled together what became the REACH Relief Fund. And by within 2 weeks, we were sending out several hundred checks, Venmo payments, PayPal payments to families.
That's so impressive.
Right?
I mean, it's kind of it's so efficient.
I mean, well, that's a responsibility that we have as organizations. I have a responsibility to be efficient. I have responsibility to do my job well. Proximity is fine. Proximity is great, but proximity is not enough to serve the people that you want to serve. You have to be good at what you do, and you have to work to be the best at what you do. Did you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's very important for us as leaders to make sure we're building ourselves as leaders so that we can be the best responders to the needs of our communities. I take that very seriously.
Did you want to run for office? Because we could use a lot more efficiency, I think. Like,
I think I'm better where I stand. I think I'm better where I stand, right? But I am even getting involved more there and want to really support folks thinking about what are the right kind of models. I believe the parent liberator model that we've created, which we'll talk about in a minute, can be applied to other social issues plaguing our city. Okay. Yes. But what I will say in terms of like how the pandemic changed us as an organization was after we launched the relief fund. Okay. And you know, some people know that we were able to give out $400,000 over a period of 3 months, right? And we were able to give this money to 1,000 families twice. And I can't even tell you the kind of like communication, like we would have folks where like, I mean, I was sitting on the floor in my living room, like sending Venmo payments. We actually have someone on our team right now who is one of our superstars who got connected with us during that period. I actually went back through our text message thread and I had sent her a direct payment. Yeah. Like it was a PayPal payment, right? That's crazy. And I think for her, it was like, wow, these folks like really responded. And now she's just like on our team two years later. It's like crazy, right?
It's a game changer, right? Like your organization really proved itself because you came through.
We came through and people wanted to give and we had the infrastructure for people to actually give. That's why we were able to give out so much money is because we responded so quickly and people were feeling powerless, right? Even people with privilege were feeling powerless. So what do? They say, I want to help other folks. That was another interesting thing that inspired the hub, which is how our organization changed. Yeah. What we were noticing during the hub was a few things. The district was struggling, right? I mean, the district was not prepared for this. They were not prepared for this from a technology perspective. Yeah. They were not prepared for this in terms of like teaching. I mean, it just was really tough. So we had families that were not connected to their teachers for like 3 weeks. Okay, it was just like, because also the district and the teachers union had to go into an agreement and go into negotiations around what does pandemic really look like, right? So that was happening. 50% of our households did not have internet access, consistent or stable internet access, or sort of like those kind of computers and things of that nature. So our families weren't prepared to now move into what was now going to be sort of this virtual learning world. So that was another thing we learned. The other thing that came up is like, oh my God, I got inundated with resources, whether it was Khan Academy, whether it was this, it was everybody was like, here are resources for your families to keep the learning going. What a privilege. I wish I could just like take a pamphlet, take a link to and just hand it to our families. You cannot do that. One, they don't have internet access. Two, you have to build a bridge of accessibility for them to be able to take these resources and make them happen. So it was kind of like, what are we going to do? So you're looking at these, you know, sort of you integrating these sort of problems. And I literally was sitting at my kitchen table, which is a brown wood table. And I was like, we got to do something different. We've got to use this as a moment. I was also one of those people listening and watching Dr. Fauci and Cuomo every single morning. I don't know who else was part of that crew.
Me too.
Every morning, right? 6:30 in the morning, I'm glued to the screen, right? But I will tell you, and everybody took from it what they wanted to take from it. What I took from it was that the pandemic is not going to end anytime soon. Right. And then what I took from it is that, and if it doesn't end, our families are going to be the ones that are hurt the most by all of that fluctuation. So we need to right now build something that no matter what happens out there, our babies can keep learning, right? Our babies can keep learning. And that's where the hub came about. The hub was about how do we create the model, the education model of excellence that we have been advocating for all this time through policy work, through leadership development. And it was about how do we integrate both the socioeconomic and academic needs and aspirations of families. You got to do both. Our families are both trying to get their kids to college and pay light bills. It's a real thing. Right. So you can't hit folks from just like one angle. You got to make sure that there's an integrated model around that. And so by the time we hit May, Karen, we were passing out laptops and Chromebooks to every single kid who had enrolled in our hub. And I love I love some folks in the city of Oakland, no hit on OUSD, but I got to give REACH props. REACH had computers and stuff out to community before anybody else did. Okay. We called T-Mobile. I said to T-Mobile, we are 501c3. We are not the official government agency, but let me tell you what we're going to need from you on today. We're going to need some government agency discounts for some internet access. We're going to need some hotspots, and we're going to need some hotspots immediately. Okay. And that turned into us being able to get a few hundred hotspots and put those hotspots with those actual computers. So our families, the families that you would say would be the most vulnerable, they already had a higher level of internet access as well as computers by the time our summer hub started in June.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's actually, it's interesting because I think so many people across the country, their experience of remote learning, was not positive. It was definitely not, not to the level of their normal learning. But the virtual hub was really an academy. It was really like academic engagement, social engagement, martial arts. You guys did everything online. And so did you invent all of that? And if so, how did you do that when it seems like, most of the nation was incapable of getting there? Is it because you knew it was going to be a long time, or because you thought about it ahead of time?
But because you can't make things better by working from a scarcity mindset. Right?
Right.
We approach this from an abundance that we're going to do something revolutionary and better in this pandemic, not respond from a place of scarcity. So it was almost like there was a part of us that blocked out anything that was telling us that it was going to be bad, so we can create the utopia that our families deserved. Now, I will selfishly say that part of how the hub was designed in this integration was from my own personal experience. I am probably the second class of the AIM High program. And the AIM High program is a program that also works with OUSD. It was founded in San Francisco by Alec Lee, who ended up also becoming my high school teacher because I attended Lick-Wilmerding High School in San Francisco, which was one of the top high schools in the city. But I learned about Lick-Wilmerding through AIM High. So this little girl from Sunnydale ends up becoming part of this AIM High program. But what inspired me about AIM High, and what then inspired me to sort of replicate that this virtual hub was, I had access to academics and curriculum that I was not getting at my school. Whether I was able to be part of the debate team, or we were doing journalism or capoeira, right?
Right.
I dissect my first animal through the AIM High program, right? It was sort of like, it was abundance. So that's in my DNA. And so when it was time to build this, you can't help but to pull from that. So this combination of sort of academic and social enrichments. So we had Fromm's martial arts. We hooked up with Acto Non Verba, I think is what it is. And they had cooking classes. They were the bomb.com, by the way, I just want to add. Their program that summer was next level. They had a whole program set up where you got a grocery bag of the food you needed. They also had the actual serving materials you would need. Wow. So just in case you didn't have like a pan at home, you got the pan. So we ended up working it out with them where our families came to pick up their food every week. Okay. So that's like the power. And then our kids learned how to cook. My now 12-year-old was like cooking meals, right? They brought in like chefs who were doing YouTube videos.
That's
like
incredible.
It was a crazy moment of like chaos and creativity and abundance all happening at the same time.
In chaos, there is opportunity, right?
Yeah. And that's the moment where, and we then, and I'm going to give a shout out to, our former chief program officer, Michael D'Souza, that's when we formed the Literacy Liberation Center. So we took all the work that we have been doing, right? Educating families, the policy work, all of that. And we took that and we created the Literacy Liberation Center. And we did focus that on the K through 2 students. So over the summer,
I see,
all K through 2 students were in the LLC. We hired teachers and paraprofessionals. So we had district and charter teachers working in the hub. And everybody was awesome. But I have to give a special shout out to the paras, okay? Because all of the teachers in the Literacy Liberation Center were Oakland paraprofessionals, okay? And these folks were the literacy teachers for our kids. And that's how our kids got the results. So in 5 weeks, 60% of our K-2 students went up 2 or more reading levels, and 30% went up 3 or more reading levels on the SIPS assessment. That was in 5 weeks. And I don't even think we expected those kind of results. But I think when you step back, you're like, if you put in the right inputs, you will get the outcomes.
Yeah.
And it was very clear to us at that time, our babies are not the problem. These babies
Right.
are not the problem. And virtual learning is not the problem, right?
That's interesting.
Did folks get sick of virtual learning after a while? Yes, they did. Everybody did, right? But the national debate is really convoluted, right? What folks don't understand that REACH was formed when we were in-person learning. Our
Right.
families felt like they were not getting a quality education in person.
It's
So
a
it was actually,
pre-existing crisis for sure. I mean,
would you say?
it's a pre-existing crisis, the literacy
It was a
crisis.
pre-existing crisis, and that was in person. So for us, it was just about creating a model of quality versus getting caught up in this debate around in-person or virtual.
Interesting. Because I do think a lot of the test scores you see now, there's so many declining test scores across the nation, and pretty much everyone is blaming remote learning.
I don't know that I would. I mean, what if we had 1,000 more hubs that were formed at the time? And I will go back a little bit. And again, our families, we had families starting to say, like in the second phase of the hub, school year started in 2020, families were saying there's some mental health stuff. So we started hosting like coffee Fridays virtually so that parents could come together and sort of share some of their stresses and frustrations. We brought in like mental health folks to do workshops. Because what was also born, Karen, out of that hub was something called the Family Sustainability Center. And that was the central place that our families came and they got both academic and socioeconomic resources, right? And that's when they participated in workshops. But that's also where they had community. I mean, we had like our little virtual community like going. So people felt connected, even though we could not be in person, and they felt supported. And we had, like when we were running the summer hub, I mean, our now we call them parent liberators, but they were family liaisons at the time. They would like peek into the Zoom classes to make sure that kids were showing up. We had an 83% attendance rate.
Wow.
In the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah. Because you had that accountability because the whole family was part of
the whole family, the accountability. If your kid wasn't in class, a parent, we were calling you saying, little Johnny is not in class. What happened? You know, and then a parent may say, oh, you know, I had to take my mom to the, you know, people had good reasons and we supported them, but we were like, look, you need to let us know if your child's not going to be able to show up. This is serious business. The business of educating our kids can't stop. And there's a lot of external factors that are challenging us right now. So we're going to have to buck it up and keep it moving. We got your back, right? But if your child's not going to be there, you know, we found that we had some folks that needed support with a phone call in the morning to make sure that the parent was getting the child up. Little things like that. We
Every
came
morning?
in the mornings.
That's
yeah.
very impressive. Yeah.
And we didn't do it forever because we're not enablers. But what we did was try to create conditions to let people know, hey, I'm going to give you a little bit of a boost, but I'm also going to hold you accountable for taking this boost and taking it to the next level, right? That's the only way. Everybody's got accountability in this.
Tell me about the language of liberator.
I mean, don't you love that word? It's freedom.
Do actually, right?
You know, it's freedom, you know, it's, you know, people use the word that like literacy is freedom. And like, it's really true. It is really, really true. And
what's that quote? Once you learn to read, you will forever be free.
Yeah. And if you think about our history in this country around reading, right? Like I told you, my family is from Mississippi, the last state to abolish slavery. Okay. Wow. The last state to abolish slavery. The Emmett Till movie's coming out, and that happened in Greenwood, Mississippi. A lot of civil rights actions and pains have happened on that land. And my grandparents were nowhere near good readers. And even as I progressed through school, I used to have to sit with them and help read through contracts and read through documents so that they could sign them. It's a real thing.
That must have been a real responsibility as a child. I mean, for you to carry that.
Well, did you taste my grandmama's food? If you taste my grandmama's food, you would have read them contracts too. Okay. I was well taken care of. And so if I could that was like the least I could do. And my grandmother just passed a year ago on October 20th, which is extremely,
sorry.
extremely still painful. Yeah, I mean, she was an amazing woman, but she gave so much to me, to us, and she couldn't help the station to which she was born, right?
No.
And I think that's why this piece is so key around making sure our kids can read, because that freedom allows you to really support your community. It really allows you to support your family.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't mean to ask an academic question, but the more I dig into literacy, I wonder if you can even call it a democracy with the level of illiteracy that we have. Because how can you participate in the democracy if you can't read? Yeah.
I
So,
know there's some questions in there
Yeah.
and stuff.
oh yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for all of that. What I'm going to do right now also is, because we didn't, I failed to show this in the first 5 minutes, and now I think we're pretty far in the conversation. So
Yeah, we don't have to do the video.
yeah, but I'm going to drop it in the chat so that folks,
Okay.
I think you all can watch this 5-minute video on your own time, and it'll give you, I mean, Lakisha's talked about some of it, but I think really giving you that 5-minute snapshot about this work and why it's so impactful. I think one of the questions I wanna, that kind of rides the theme of what you've been speaking about, and especially, you know, you mentioned you all do a lot of work around the sort of policy and system change. And again, I think when people ask me, I think I even mentioned this to Karen on the phone, when I'm like, when I think about what started shifting just from my perspective of having been doing this work in Oakland for a while, that Literacy for All campaign. And again, we are a coalition, we've had coalitions, but I think that did create change, not just the opportunity ticket you did, but I think a lot of our district work around really there were so many people involved, but that ability to actually now say, we do have a new curriculum, we have changed, we are investing in a different way. I think what really drove that, and even motivated some of us, like not as the system, but as outside partners, to really say it feels different now and we can put this energy into it, was because it was families demanding it. And it was families I mean, the way you show up at all the different tables and say, no, this is what we're going to talk about, and this is what we're going to do. Those were big systemic changes just here in Oakland. And so one of the questions we have is, how would you want to see, or what opportunities do you see for parent leadership to be centered and institutionalized in our education systems and structures? Are there places that you either think we need to do, you just want to see it happen, or you're seeing some movement to happen that says this isn't going to take extraordinary outside groups, but we can make this a more institutionalized part of just how we do business?
Yeah, no, good question. And I think if I'm interpreting the question correctly, then my response would be, I believe that the model we've created, which is the parent liberator model, is sort of the response to that, right? It's really about, oftentimes people say the people closest to the issues need to be the ones at the table, like solving those issues, right? And so from that is really where this parent liberator model came from. And it is upskilling. So we are upskilling community, right, to be able to become literacy tutors. So OUSD, we're also one of the co-chairs for the strategic plan, which is Read by Third Grade. One of the metrics in that strategic plan is to have 92 tutors across K through 2 that would ultimately serve our most vulnerable students. And I think it's about I think the number is about 5,600 or something like that, right? But we're in a talent desert. You hear locally, you hear on the news, like OUSD had a ton of vacancies, teaching vacancies before the pandemic. So I don't care what people tell you, it's like, it's been hard to get talent and retain talent. And that only was amplified, right? And so we got to be mindful of doubling down on the same approaches that we take to make this happen. And so the Liberator model is really around, how do we really deeply invest in community to be at the table? So as we speak, we're already in partnership with the district. I feel like it's already happening. So that's actually positive. You guys hear too much negative stuff, right? So I just want to note that you hear too much negative stuff that does not impact the majority of students in our city. But there are some really positive, like innovative, system changing things that are happening. And this liberator model and principals, by the way, are involved in this too. So it's almost like this whole group of us that are pouring in to recruit. So those 92 tutors, I believe, and I don't know, I don't have all the data, but I know at least a third or more of all of those tutors will be from the community. Okay, we have about 22 slots left. And you know what we do when we have slots? We hit the streets. So if you drive through Oakland, you're going to see some yellow shirts out there in front of schools from 7:30 to 9 and 2 to 4, actually talking to folks and encouraging them to become paid literacy tutors. We are doing all the professional development and supports. I hope our partners, Fluent Seeds, are on here. Fluent Seeds, they are amazing, amazing, amazing. They are the pedagogical partner, right? So when we start talking about institutionalizing this in this moment in time and ahead, it's like, when you say parent power, Sanam, that's power. When you go back to 2019, when we're on the phone with our parents and they're like, my kid can't read. And now you're in 2022 and you got parents becoming literacy tutors, that's power. Right? And we're looking to replicate that same thing. And I know this is all literacy, but if you think literacy is bad, check out math. Okay. So we're about to start working on math. And there's also some data around the fact that like Black children being able to be strong in math actually has predictors for better life outcomes in the long term. That's a conversation for a different day. But that is sort of my best response to sort of the institutionalized component, is that we have to, in innovative ways and strategically, bring up the weight of our communities to really solve these. You cannot imagine how powerless it feels, right? To care and want better for your children and get a lot of misdirection around how you actually make those changes, right? So there's definitely advocacy work we're doing. You know, we have a parent resolution on the table around collective bargaining agreements. But the last time I was at a board meeting since October 6th was last September, right? We got work to do. We've got work to do. So we spend our time doing that work. We come to the board when we have business to take care of, right? In the business of families. So I believe that that is the new frontier. The new frontier is our communities are ripe and ready. And by the way, superintendents leave, principals leave, teachers leave, communities stay. And you want your community to be in a position where they can keep that work moving. And better yet, what would it look like if, now I would love for Kyla to stick around, but let's say Kyla leaves, okay? And we got a new superintendent. What would it look like if the parent liberators or the folks on the ground brought the superintendent in? One was part of selecting the superintendent, but also said, let me just bring you in to what we've already been moving on behalf of our kids. We're going to bring you to the table. This is the table, right? So this person already understands the assignment. This is what we've already been doing to move literacy and math outcomes for our kids. We would love for you to come and be a part of what's moving. I don't know. If I was a superintendent in that situation, I bet you I'd stick around for a little bit. If I was a principal in that situation, I bet you I'll stick around. And I will tell you, if I was a teacher in that situation, we would have better retention. You want our parents coming to the school fussing, or do you want them coming and doing a small group with kids talking about literacy, or actually being able to sit down with parents? You know, a parent liberator, literacy liberator. Every parent we call a parent liberator, by the way. But the folks who are being hired through OUSD are what we call literacy liberators, okay? These folks will be no joke. And what I mean by no joke is that they will have the ability to not just work with students, but work with their parents. And they will have the ability to sit down with parents and be able to talk about like their children's reading scores and things of that nature. They also will be able to have proximity and share, because many of the folks who are signing up to be literacy tutors have horrible stories around literacy and horrible paths around literacy that they then can connect to. And somebody looks and said, wait a minute, you couldn't read, or you had issues with your child's reading, and now you're here as a literacy liberator. It's possible. People need to see what's possible. That's why I tell you, we have a very deep scarcity mindset in this city around when it comes, And that is ultimately, I think, what is killing us. There is an abundance, there is ways to make this work, right? But we got to get out of the fighting. We got to get out of the BS so that we actually can breed innovation in this city that is known for innovation and social justice. That was a long answer to that question, Sanam. I hope it answered.
I think it was a good answer, though.
I hope it answered 3 or 4 more questions.
Yeah, we do have just under 10 minutes, so we have a little bit of time, and I see a few more coming in. So I'm going to kind of cluster 2 questions, and you can kind of take it how you want to go. One is a question around when you feel is sort of the right, it's sort of about early literacy, and when do you kind of see or think is the right time that we start supporting kids with early literacy? And I'll piggyback onto that a question about what kind of resources you wish existed for parents to engage with their children's learn to read journeys. So not just what they would have access to, but is there something that doesn't exist that needs to exist and be developed? And maybe part of that will say, is there a place or time or an age where you think we should really be starting to kick off that reading journey?
Well, I started reading when I was 4, right? And that really started, like, you have to start when they're babies. Like, all of the things that we take for granted in terms of like connecting babies and toddlers to language makes a huge difference. My mom was a single mom. Like I said, we lived in the Sunnydale project, but every single day we would come home. Phonics was also a huge part, right, of building my literacy skills. Like, we did a lot of word practicing. She had me working in workbooks. And again, she wasn't an expert, but it was the practice and the setup. She would cook dinner, I would sit at the table, and we would sort of do this practice. And we made it fun. So when you say sort of when should we be exposing this to them, like from the very beginning, it should be normalized. I think like what's missing, I think we get these resources. We have to have a deeper connection and investment with our communities to make this happen. If we want to see this happen with our younger kids, that role like parent liberators, those folks have to be deeply connected to those families and those communities to help and support those families. Because again, our families want their kids to read, but they also are dealing with a lot of other socioeconomic and community environmental challenges that they're trying to solve. So they need a liaison. They need a liberator to help support their liberation, right? So I believe that there's sort of a lot out there that has been created and that we can do, but what we're missing is the type of person, right? And the type of supports that really help keep families invested and engaged over the long haul. I think that's what the liberation model really is about. I think we give resources to parents, and then we sort of like give ourselves a thumb up and be like, that's great. I just did this like online workshop for parents on parenting and online workshop on whatever. And we just assume that they're able to take these resources back and integrate them into their lives. And I'm going to tell you, the resounding answer is no. They need to have someone supporting them along that spectrum from like baby all the way through to that child graduates from high school.
Yeah, I know what I wrote.
Sana, that connection you were talking about that you saw, like that's what it is.
Yeah, and I know I've already written in my notebook a few versions of it's not a program, it's a relationship. So I'm definitely walking away, even, marinating on that even more.
Yeah, because we haven't changed any of the correct. I mean, we're using SIPs. I mean, this whole thing we're doing will be on the district adopted curriculum. It's on SIPs. But what will make it different is the investment that we're going to put into folks who are leading this work so that they are liberated and thus will be able to liberate others.
Yeah. I have another question that says, as a school librarian, I'd love to inspire more parent outreach to help our students with literacy. What kind of support have you gotten from school librarians, and has it helped you? Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to be, people know me as being pretty honest and authentic, right? In all the few years that we've been doing this work on literacy, we have not seen a value in libraries. And honestly, the only time that someone that was sort of library focused came to talk was when they wanted us to support to save the libraries, right? And I remember having a conversation with the person at that time saying that, like, it's not just about having libraries with books, it's about making sure kids can read, right? And like, we would love to partner and be supportive of libraries as long as we can make sure that we keep the main thing, which is how do these become extensions of kids actually being able to read? So I just, I would love to talk about that more, but what we've experienced is a bit of a disconnect between school libraries and kids reading, right? And I've talked to a few people both on the local level and on like the national level about what that looks like. I mean, because the tricky part about it is that we have libraries all over the city that can be great hubs. I think part of what we've thought about is like, hey, could we run some of our PDs with our parent liberators at some of the libraries? How do we bring the work of the community into the libraries so that these like public spaces actually become a benefit? So I think part of it is from the library side being open to what is actually needed, right, from our communities to embrace and connect with literacy and learning. It takes more than the physical space of a library, right? It takes being able to have an experience inside of that library that then fundamentally shifts or helps grow that. And one way for that to happen, because we have all these great library spaces across our city, is to bring like programs like our model and things like that to the libraries themselves and sort of create that source of integration.
Yeah. And I do think, I mean, I know, as in our organization with some of our work around school library partnerships, that has been such a conversation, which is how do we make these about what do we do with the libraries? And our team has been really, we have a great school librarian, or our leader of that program has a background in school libraries, and it's really been about what needs to happen in those spaces. And I know that's been shifting overall as we talk about, and in the Right to Read film, this is a big message, which is we're also just moving towards having books not being enough, right? So even though we do book distributions, or we want books in every home and we want access to resources, it has to be coupled with an experience people can have with those books and the ability to engage with those books and spaces.
And Sam, let me just add this last component, because I think some of the debates we've had in Oakland in this library conversation, and I appreciate the question from the person who gave the question, I'm inspired to say that we do, I think our focus is, not I think, I feel pretty sure that our focus is not enough about kids. I think that we think our focus is about kids, right? But it's almost like, what are you willing to destroy? And what are you willing to abandon? Especially if it's not working, to make sure that our kids can read and do that. I put that in front of like every person on this webinar or in this city, because we have things that need to be destroyed and abandoned, and we need to clean the slate if we're truly going to get to a city of literate kids. So it's almost like, yeah, we want the babies to read, but as long as it happens in this way, it's gotta happen in this way. So our school closure conversations, they're not about kids reading and doing math. It's about buildings. So when I think about the library component, how does the library evolve its existence so that it can truly be a place where kids are learning and doing math well? So it's a lot of like, these adult agendas, this adult thing, like we've got to hold on to this. I try to thrive. I thrive on trying to be a leader that I don't get attached to anything if it ain't working. If I am proven wrong, I will abandon it for the better thing. We have to be willing to abandon our ideologies if we claim that we are here for kids.
Yeah. We
can't say we're here for kids only if we can do all of these 8 things. I'm for the babies, but these 8 things got to be in place. And if helping babies fit in these 8 things, then I'm all about the babies. But if you told me to abandon this, then I don't know what to tell you. I'm gonna make it fit. I'm gonna make it fit in this. That's what's wrong with our city right now. And that's why our kids can't read. Our kids can read. Our kids could read. It's the adults holding on to all of the things that they're holding on to and not being willing to abandon or disrupt the things that are not working to move into things that are working. And Sonam, as you know, that was the power of the Literacy for All campaign. I think we just all came humbled by the fact that we had an enormous problem to solve and being super open to how we solve that problem. Yeah. And I think that's why we made the headway that we made. That's how you change systems. Let it go. Release it. It ain't working. And if the numbers don't show you it ain't working, the crime should tell you it ain't working. Because I know that Karen has talked a lot about the fact that our men in prison, many of which are Black men, are also illiterate. If you want to stop some of these other systemic issues that are happening in the city, you got to start with them now. If they are not reading now, you are going to have a hard time keeping them out of prison later. Let it go. It ain't working. Sorry, I got a little preachy. But
no, I mean, I can't imagine a better place to end our Q&A. I know we're just over time. So Karen, I'll see if you have any last remarks you want to close us with.
No, that was exactly what I was just curious. So what are some of the things you think we should think about abandoning as we move forward to try and clean the slate and actually kind of build a new system instead of like tweaking and tweaking and tweaking the old broken system?
Well, I'm going to say this last thing because I can imagine that some of the folks who have put in Q&A, I haven't clicked on the Q&As. I'm leaving that to Sonam. Yeah. People have seen things in the KQED article and stuff, and people may want to know, why is Oakland REACH and California Parent Power focused on this collective bargaining agreement, right? And this whole thing with the collective bargaining agreement is an issue around our kids' learning outcomes. Folks need to understand that, okay? Collective bargaining agreements are not just about salaries. We are on board to make sure that our teachers are paid well. We want them to pay well, we want them to stay, we want them to be retained. But the collective bargaining agreement is a formula around conditions, around time, and around compensation. And I'll just stop and say the word time. Time is something you cannot get back. The way time is used, the way time is allocated is critical. When you think about yourself on this call as someone doing your job today, how you spend your time today will dictate the results of what you get done. That's the same that applies in our schools with our kids. So where parents want to table to is to be able to understand what are the conditions and how is the time being used in the most effective way to just make sure our babies can read. That is it. You may think it's provocative, you may think it's radical, but what's more radical about it is that we're not trying to, I think what's most radical about what we're doing is that we're willing to confront everything or anything that's not working. And maybe that's where the courage comes in. The courage comes in is stop trying to do hard work while being comfortable, okay? Stop trying to do hard work while being comfortable. You can't be comfortable trying to make sure that our kids in this sort of crisis are able to read. You should feel extremely uncomfortable. So Karen, that sort of like, we want to make a change, but we got to be comfortable. That stuff is killing us, right? So I just want to share that like we have systemic structures that if they are not shaken or disrupted, we will never. Last thing I'll say, Sonam, is that curriculum you're talking about, just an example, that curriculum you're talking about, and that curriculum adoption was done well. I know that everybody didn't agree with it, but a lot of people were at the table. We had principals at the table, there were central staff at the table, there were teacher leaders, there were principals, okay? It was done well. Now you have to ask yourself the question, how is that going to actually get to our kids? What are the conditions that are going to be put into place? Are teachers going to have the appropriate professional development opportunities? If you're learning something new, you think you can learn it in a few days? Yeah. You're going to need to have some real professional development to be able to learn the new curriculum so that you actually can teach it to kids. See, that's what we don't talk about. Yeah. So all that work that was spent with all of these people agreeing to a curriculum, ask those people, are they going to actually get to the kids? Are the conditions set up in our schools to get that curriculum to every single kid that deserves? So good things happen here, and then soon as it gets hard down the line, we start making left turns. We start making U-turns. And guess who suffers? The kids suffer. That's the only kids who suffer, and who really suffers are Black and brown kids. I could go another hour. I thought we was, we thought we were not going to have enough time, and I'm backing up.
We should do
But
it again next week, probably.
we
right?
should. Karen, I don't know
So many
why we
issues.
thought we were not going to have enough time because I'm just getting started. Okay.
And it always is hard to cut off when we know, but I know folks, you know, we're a few minutes over, and I know folks have things they're doing today after this, but I just hope you'll join me in really appreciating Lakisha and Karen for making this conversation happen. I know I'm walking away with so many pieces to just take back into my work. Not just today and tomorrow in our actual Saturday symposium, but just in how I do this work every day. So I thank you for that. And I every time I hear you remind us that we need to be uncomfortable, I know I do take it to heart. So thank you everyone for being here. We will.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for people for
thank
staying
you.
on. A lot of people stayed on,
I know.
even though we went over, and I appreciate that. I personally appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you
Yes,
so
there
much.
will be a
Very
recording
good.
available. And please take a moment to click on the link in the form. There's just a few questions if you could answer for us. It's always really helpful for feedback. So thank you, everyone. Hope to see some of you Saturday.
See you guys
See you
tomorrow.
later.
Bye.